Hi, Grace.
Hi, Heather. Can you see and hear me and everything okay?
Yep. Is everything good from my end?
Yeah, you seem good. I love your space. Look at
Th-
all those guitars. That's awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, my husband plays and I play drums. So
Oh, super cool. One of my brothers plays drums.
nice.
I play piano a little, but I'm not very good.
Yeah, I grew up playing piano, but I don't really play anymore.
Yeah, that was my thing is I grew up playing piano and I stuck with it not in a serious way, but in like a stress relief way. So when I'm
Yeah.
like really stressed, I like bang.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but there's no innate skill there and no real dedication.
Same on my end. Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of it was kind of forced on me as a kid, so I'm like, "Oh, it's not
Yeah.
really my thing anymore."
Yeah. It was forced on me too, but for
Yeah.
long enough that it just kind of, at a certain point I went, well, I'd like to know how to play an instrument and learning a new one seems hard.
Yeah.
I've already
Yeah.
got this one right here.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so let's get started. Um,
Sounds good.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your career in writing?
Sure. So if you clicked on this video, you probably already know this, but my name's Grace Daly. I use she, her pronouns. I am a disabled writer. I live kind of near Chicago in the Midwest of the United States. And my writing really began with me. I usually say like becoming disabled, or sometimes I'll use the phrase if I'm talking to people who aren't familiar with like, disability lingo or who still think disability is a bad word. I'll say since I got sick. But actually, what I have is genetic disease and several other chronic illnesses related to that genetic disease. So, in some ways, I've always been disabled, but I didn't realize it, and my symptoms didn't get bad enough to make me stop permanently working until 2019. And then I had a therapist and I was like trying to work through a lot of the medical trauma that I got from having my symptoms be dismissed for well over a decade. And also I was, really struggling with like, okay, like how do I self-identify like now that I'm disabled? Because I kind of had fallen for the capitalist pill of like, like you are your production, you are your economic value. And so when I couldn't work full time anymore, I kind of had this spiral of like, who am I? What value do I have? Which is silly because we all have inherent worth, but it's hard sometimes in a capitalist society to remember that. And my therapist at the time was like, well, you really like cooking and you're eloquent. You should write a cookbook. And I remember in my head going like, that's dumb. I'm not that good at cooking. I'll just write a regular book.
Yeah.
And I just sat down and like wrote a book. And it was not very good.
Yeah.
I
What?
didn't know what I was doing. But I wrote my first manuscript, which is unpublished and probably should stay that way. And then I, wrote a bunch of short stories. I wrote a novella, and I kept writing and writing, and then eventually I wrote The Scald Crow.
Yeah, that's amazing. The Scald Crow was really important to me when I read it for the first time last year as an ARC. Um, it felt really relatable, and I hadn't seen a lot of the stuff that you presented in there in other media. You talk about like medical trauma, and that is really relatable to me too because like I had adenomyosis, and that was something that it took forever for to find the right doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is nuts because it's really common. Adenomyosis and endometriosis, like the estimation is about 10%
Yeah.
of all like, like uterus havers have endo or adeno, and often they happen concurrently. And that's absolutely ludicrous that the delay for diagnosis is as long as it is. If anyone wants to like look up the actual figures, I do have them in the author's note of the Scald Crow, but I'm pretty sure the average figures are like 7 to 10 years
Yeah.
from symptom onset, which is absolutely nuts. And it took
Yeah.
me much longer than that from symptom onset,
Yeah.
which is wild.
For real. Like for me, it. going through multiple doctors, finally finding the right doctor, and then trying to be persistent in that and advocating for yourself. But it's hard when you're already sick and you're already in pain.
Oh, it's so difficult. Yeah, when you're already sick, you're already in pain, you're having to deal with this like illness on top of everything else that's just like the normal minutia of everyday life.
Yeah.
And then you have doctors who are, in our society, the way we're raised to think about them as authority figures,
Yep.
and so you have these well-educated authority figures who are very, very confident that they as individuals are correct. Frequently, not all of them, like some doctors are very empathetic and like and wonderful practitioners. But I ran into a lot of doctors who very smugly told me, that it was all in my head, that I was anxious, that, like I was just a nervous young woman. And, in their defense, I would go into their offices very desperate and seeming very anxious
Yeah.
because I was in incredible pain and desperate for an answer.
Yep. Exactly.
That's a reasonable response to
Ex-
being in, uncontrolled chronic pain. That's a very reasonable response.
for real. Like
Yeah.
I can't count the times that I was told just to go home and just take Tylenol. There was one
Yes.
time I went into the emergency room because I had been bleeding for like a month,
Hmm.
and they diagnosed me without any pregnancy test or anything. They told me that I had had a miscarriage and to just go home and take Tylenol. And there was no way I had been pregnant. It just wasn't possible.
That's so,
Yeah.
oh, that's so negligent. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, and oh my goodness. Oh God. Sorry. I hear like I lived a lot of these stories and I hear these stories a lot because I talk so much about disability and invisible illness with
Hmm.
people and I'm still stunned. Like every time I'm still just flabbergasted by
Yeah.
just the the mundanity of like the horrors, And I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know, I think it really speaks a lot to how there's like all of this, patriarchal thought in our medical system, even, even today, even in our modern era. Because, like, can you imagine a man
Yeah.
bleeding for a month
Yeah.
and going to the ER and them sending him home and telling him to take some Tylenol?
I know. I know.
I
It wouldn't happen.
Never, never in a million years,
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I absolutely it's absolutely ludicrous. It's absolutely insane. The sort of pain that like, again, women, uterus havers, what have you, are expected to tolerate just because there really hasn't been the attention and the research and the funding put towards, these sorts of health conditions. It's absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
I would love us to get the funding that Viagra gets. Like I'd love that funding to go to endo and adeno.
That would
Like,
be for real. That would be
let's just flip the funding for like 5 years, okay?
that that would do a
Like
lot,
that would do
honestly.
a lot. Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's a very, very it's very, very like key and like close to my heart.
Yeah.
So
So kind of jumping into that, we're here to talk about The Scald Crow,
yes.
which I believe was your debut novel.
Yes, that's my debut.
So give us a brief synopsis of the story itself.
Sure. So the Scald Crow follows Briege. Briege is a young woman who recently lost her job due to chronic pelvic pain that she hasn't been able to get diagnosed despite having multiple surgeries and going to multiple doctors about it. She is, broke. She's lost her job because of this disability. And around the same time, her abusive mother goes missing. And so she decides to move back into her childhood home. And as soon as she does, a whole whole bunch of spooky stuff starts happening. This evil bird, the scald crow, starts following her everywhere she goes. This painting of Jesus keeps moving around on its own. Like horrible rotten trash starts appearing in the house, and she starts finding frozen body parts in place of everyday objects throughout the house. At one point, she finds like a man's severed finger screwed into the wall in the bathroom instead of a door stopper. But it's set in the Midwest. It's set in St. Charles, Illinois, which is a distant suburb of Chicago. And so she's very chill. Midwesterners never freak out. We never freak out.
Yeah.
You're in Minnesota, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, you know that. We never freak out.
Yeah. And always putting everybody else's needs before our own.
Always putting everybody else's needs before our own. That's how we are raised.
Yep.
So she pops that bad boy in a Ziploc baggie, puts it in the freezer, decides to deal with it later when she's feeling more calm, pops an edible, goes to bed.
Yeah.
And then later it's a door stopper again. And she's like, well, I guess I have to call my therapist. Ultimately she can't tell, what's real and what's fake. All of her doctors are telling her that she's anxious, that she's, she's crazy. She doesn't know what's going on. She's imagining this pain she has. And, she's forced to conclude, well, if I'm imagining all of this pain, all of this bleeding, all of these symptoms, isn't it possible that I'm imagining or manipulating or somehow doing all of these horrible, scary things myself? And she's trying to do everything right. She's going to therapy. She's following up with doctors. She's doing her pelvic floor physical therapy. She's doing everything she can. And yet things just keep getting harder and harder and more horrible. And she's trying to manage all of this as she experiences really, really intense pain. And, ultimately she ends up adopting this very wonderful rescue cat, who kind of helps her find some of her internal strength to like start facing all of the horrible hauntings that are occurring to her.
Yeah. I loved Q. That was amazing.
Q is everyone's favorite character, and everyone is right. He's a very good kitty, top tier kitty.
Yes.
He's a very good kitty.
Yeah.
Koo is actually based on a real cat that actually exists. At the time when I was writing The Scald Crow, there was a cat up for adoption at the shelter that's like half a mile from my house. And like exactly description down to like the scar on his nose that makes him snort.
Yeah.
That cat is Koo. And I really, 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 really wanted to adopt him, but I couldn't afford like another cat's worth of vet bills.
Yeah.
Especially because the cat was, like in the book, already pretty old. Like Koo's already pretty old in the book. And so I had to lovingly watch as someone else adopted what should have rightfully been my cat.
Yeah, that's hard.
So I wrote him into the book instead.
I love that. That's an amazing homage.
Yeah, right. So in some ways I kind of got to keep him.
Yeah. So there's a lot of parts that feel very personal. What were like a lot of your inspirations for writing this story?
Ooh, well, obviously the disability is like the biggest thing for me. Then not only the representation of disability, but that representation of chronic pain and that experience of having it blamed on like some sort of personal failing versus, actually having doctors really commit to themselves to trying to, figure out if there is like a physical cause. It being so kind of like blandly just dismissed. And I also really wanted to capture the way I think that we have sometimes like a cultural imagining that if you become disabled or chronically ill, like all of society, like everyone and doctors and the government and just, a board of nice people are just going to swoop in and support you, and you don't have to worry about money anymore, and everyone's going to take care of you, and you don't have to do chores anymore, and you don't have to get groceries. You're sick,
Yeah.
And that's not really how it works. You have to do everything that you have to do. You just have to do it while sick. You have to do it while disabled. And if you can't do it, you either have to do without or find some creative solution. because the support that we kind of culturally imagine, disappears very quickly.
Yeah.
And so I kind of wanted to capture that too, that way that Briege's disability ultimately isolates her and puts even more strain on somebody who's already under a lot of strain. And I just feel like I haven't really seen that depicted very much in, any fiction at all. And so I kind of wanted to capture that. Of course, there are other inspirations. The recurrent nightmare that happens over and over again is a recurrent nightmare that I had as a kid.
Yeah.
And so that's where the recurrent nightmare came from. The house is exactly the house that my grandmother lived in when I was growing up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so like down to the basket weave teapot with the shamrocks painted on it.
Yeah.
It is exactly her house. And so that's where the setting came from too, of St. Charles, because that's where she lived when I was little. And so there was that inspiration there. I already talked about Coup and the
Yeah.
inspiration for Coup. And like Carol, the therapist, her personality is based on the personality of the therapist who told me I should write a cookbook.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of like little pieces of my life that like came together to make the whole story. But really, really, really what I was trying to do was tell a story about a character who was ultimately like pretty lovable and
Yeah.
pretty relatable, who, due to all of this medical gaslighting and childhood trauma and medical trauma, had really grown to doubt herself and to hate herself. And like, I really, really wanted readers to have that, that empathy for her, because I wanted able-bodied readers to suddenly understand a little bit better what it's like to live with an invisible disability. And I wanted folks who have invisible disabilities who read it to feel all of that compassion for Briege, and then realize that any compassion they feel for Briege, she's fake. That
Yeah.
compassion is for them.
Yeah.
Like, if you're disabled and you love Briege and you think Briege deserves kindness and gentleness and compassion, like, baby, that kindness and gentleness and compassion, that's for you.
Yeah. That's
Briege isn't
amazing.
real. You are.
Yeah, I love that because it
Yeah.
felt very relatable and very real. And I related very heavily to Breege. And that's kind of when I wrote my review, that's kind of one thing I focused on was, hey, like if you're disabled or you have an invisible illness, you're going to see yourself represented in this. If you're
Yeah.
not, still read this and get to see like what a day inside the life of someone living with these illnesses looks like.
Yeah. What was really moving to me is I've had a couple people message me and say that they were asked to read The Scald Crow by their disabled like loved ones, by like their disabled friends and loved ones. And that like they read The Scald Crow and then they were able to have like this like really deep, intimate conversation with the
Yeah.
person who asked them to read it. And I was like, I've gotten a few of those. And it was just like, wow, like what an act of love. What like a wonderful thing that I've like kind of been able to like do. It's like, it's so, so wonderful. And I'm really, really pleased that I'm like kind of enabling these conversations in a way that's difficult otherwise. And one thing that I really hope for too is I know that similar to Briege worries a lot that she's really whiny, and she doesn't really want to talk that much about her symptoms and her problems with other characters in the
Yeah.
book. Because she doesn't want to burden them. And so you kind of get this unfiltered, like, whininess in her internal monologue.
Yeah.
And one thing I hope is that when disabled people like give it to their loved ones and ask them to read it, um, I hope I hope it kind of they get the experience, that cathartic experience of whining without
Yeah.
having to actually put themselves in the uncomfortable position of like being that vulnerable,
I think that'll work because like that's one of the things that goes along so much with it is you don't want to annoy or burden,
Mhm.
like in quotes, your loved ones. You don't
Yeah.
want to add anything more onto them than you feel like you already are.
Yep.
And I think you did it in a really good way that is going to show like, hey, this is what our internal monologue is like. But at the same time, we're dealing with all this stuff.
Yep. Yeah, yeah. She's in so much pain. She's so clearly struggling, but she still cleans the kitchen. She still goes to the grocery store. She's still making it happen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And she's cleaning up that mess of trash everywhere and not asking for someone to come in and help.
yep,
Um,
exactly. Yeah, she's doing her best.
yeah. If someone hasn't experienced the kind of doubt, like from families and doctors over chronic pain and invisible illness, kind of like we talked about, they could believe Briege is an unreliable narrator. Did you intentionally want that to play into the building terror and what you were building?
Thank you for asking me that question. I keep waiting for people to ask me that question,
Yeah.
and nobody has done it yet. So thank you for being the first.
Yeah.
So actually, it is, and I say this with the deepest love and no criticism for all of the very, very kind reviewers who loved the Scald Crow and loved the unreliable narrator aspect. Briege is the most reliable narrator. Briege is. It makes me so angry, actually, when people refer to Briege as an unreliable narrator. It actually really, really makes me mad because I'm like, did you read it?
Yeah.
Briege is a incredibly reliable narrator. She never lies. She never disguises the truth. If anything, she's unfair to herself.
Yeah.
If anything, she's so concerned with being reliable and so concerned with not lying and like not misleading anyone and not misleading herself.
Yeah. And she
Um,
never exaggerates anything either.
yeah, she never exaggerates. And anytime she starts to get melodramatic, she immediately like criticizes herself.
Yep.
Briege is meant to be an incredibly reliable narrator who is struggling with a unreasonable situation. She's having reasonable responses to unreasonable situations. So it does actually kind of drive me nuts when people say that I wrote a really good unreliable narrator
Yeah.
because I do have a book that's coming out. It's like a choose your own adventure novel at the beginning of 2027. Oh, actually, I probably shouldn't. It's not been officially announced yet. This is shh.
Okay. I'll keep it a secret.
Keep it a secret. Keep this public interview a secret.
Yeah.
But like that one has an unreliable narrator. But no, Briege is telling the truth the whole time. And it does frustrate me when people say she's an unreliable
Yeah. That
narrator.
makes sense. Like, I really loved that play on it because I love the unreliable narrator trope. So seeing
Yes.
this and having it twisted on its head,
Yeah,
like,
it flips. Yeah.
yeah,
I joke that the other trope I flipped is like I know what I saw.
yeah,
Like Briege has no idea what she saw.
yeah, yeah. That kind of leads into my next question. So she's also seeing things that then seemingly change form or disappear, which leads her to believe she's hallucinating.
Mhm.
So we also kind of start to question what's actually going on right now. Did you know where the story was going to end from the start?
Yes. So this is how I personally write is anytime I'm writing anything, short story or all the way to book length, I know how I want it to end right from the get-go. For me, it's very difficult to conceive of a story or know why I'm writing something if I don't begin with the end in mind. Um, so when I sat down to write The Scald Crow, I knew the most important thing that I knew right from the get go is that whatever was happening to Briege all of it. This is so many spoilers, by the way. Just anyone watching this interview, like, just you should have already read the book.
Yeah.
I'm saying
Spoiler
so many
alert.
spoilers.
Yeah.
But everything that happens to Briege actually happens. And I knew that right from the outset. And basically, as soon as I decided Irish folklore was the source of the horror and the source of the haunting, like the ending just like clocked right into place.
Yeah.
And so I had my major themes. I always start with knowing what I want my ending to be and knowing what I want my major themes to be. And the ending is so important to me because I feel like I can't really say like my major themes and say what I'm trying to say if I don't know what that ending is. That ending's gotta matter. And I also, this is just me personally, like as a reader or as like a consumer of entertainment, I really, really, really hate it when things don't stick the landing.
Yeah.
So just like personally, I need to feel like I've got an ending that sticks before I'm willing to put the effort into writing something.
That makes a lot of sense. Like you need to know where you're going before you start with it.
Exactly. Yeah. Before I became disabled, before I stopped working, I was a project manager, and like you can really feel like if you look at my like writing process, you can really feel the project
Yeah.
manager in me, like the prioritization and the goals and the checkpoints and
Yeah.
yeah.
I loved it because it felt really realistic and really real. But at the same time, I didn't know where it was going to end. And when we get
Yeah.
that final reveal, I was like, oh crap. Like that was
Yeah.
really cool.
What I really love in an ending, and I've heard other people say this, is you want the ending to be something that the reader doesn't know it, but then as soon as they read it, they go, "Oh, of course."
Yeah.
Like, oh, of course that's it. And so that's always what I'm shooting for is that feeling of like, oh, yes, this is how it had to end,
Yeah.
is that feeling of rightness.
Yeah.
So.
Kind of circling back, although IC was a misdiagnosis for Briege, seeing both it and adenomyosis represented here felt very important as I've lived with both and I've never seen either in media.
Yeah.
How did you decide which chronic illnesses Briege would live with?
So that was kind of an easy decision. The reason, Briege's illnesses were 100% based on my own experiences with endo and adeno.
Yeah.
I have, as I mentioned earlier in this interview, a genetic disease, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and with that, I have also postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome and mast cell activation syndrome, which are kind of like they're three conditions that frequently go together.
Yeah.
But there's also a very high, and they don't really know why, like we don't really know exactly why, but there's a very high incidence also of endo and adeno with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I am it's better managed now. I'm actually on a medication that induces chemical menopause. I haven't had a hysterectomy due to concerns about the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And it's better managed now. But when my endo and adeno were undiagnosed and were uncontrolled, they were so profoundly disabling and so frightening.
Yeah.
And all of my various illnesses are like frightening and disabling in their own ways, but the endo and adeno, the pain and the fear, but like you said, like bleeding for a month, like it was not unusual for me to bleed for like 58 days at a
Yeah.
time, and that's just it's so scary. And so when I knew that I was setting out to write a horror book, it felt very natural to pick what I found so frightening.
Yeah.
And then of course with like endo and adeno, you've got that all of the blood, like the gore aspect, which fits really neatly into a horror novel.
Yeah.
I knew I wanted it, to be very much this kind of like critique of how like women in uterus havers are treated in the medical system.
Yeah.
And so I wanted it to be like endo and adeno for that reason. And yeah, I just had kind of like all of this personal experience that I could draw from. And then the IC misdiagnosis, the interstitial cystitis misdiagnosis, was a misdiagnosis that I personally got. a lot of Brigia's journey to getting that adeno diagnosis is like exactly what my journey was.
Yeah.
I saw more gynecologists than Briege saw. It actually took me longer than it took Briege.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I had two surgeries and they missed the adeno both times. That thing where she brought pictures to the final, again, this is so many spoilers. This is like the end of the book,
Yeah.
but where she brings pictures to the doctor from one of her previous surgeries, and the doctor's looking at pictures that the surgeon took, and the doctor from the pictures is able to tell that her uterus is misshapen. Like that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
And you know that for me, like years had elapsed between that last surgery and me actually getting a diagnosis. And you know, and I don't explore this in Scald Crow because, you know, you can only do so many things in like a narrative and keep it tight. But like, you know, to this day, like I wonder, did the surgeon who took the pictures of my uterus where the uterus is clearly not right, um, did that surgeon actually realize and notice? And did she just not want to give me a hysterectomy?
Yeah.
Because I had given the surgeon really clear instructions before. I was like, if I have adenomyosis, like I want a hysterectomy. I don't care about childbearing. And I was young at the time of this
Yeah.
surgery. I think I was only 25. And I was like, I don't care about having kids. I'm in so much pain. Like, I will just adopt if I change my mind about having children. You know, like I'm in so much pain. And that surgeon was like an expert in endometriosis, but that surgeon worked at a clinic that was a fertility clinic and was very, very resistant
Yeah.
to doing anything that would permanently reduce or remove my fertility. Very, very resistant, despite the fact that I have a genetic disease that I don't want to pass on.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's
that surgeon was very, very resistant. And to this day, I do find myself wondering if the surgeon purposefully didn't tell me about the adenomyosis so that I would stay fertile. And I cannot prove that. And that's a really, really mean and cruel
yeah.
thing to think about someone, that they would lie like that. But that's how much medical trauma I
Yeah.
have,
It's really
is that I have
understandable.
that doubt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
Because
is
like
nuts.
yeah, it's horrifying that like uterus havers have to go through this, have
Yeah.
to deal with this, and have to deal with that. Like, even though you directly tell the doctor, like, I kind of
Mhm.
had the same experience. I, if this is what's happening, if this is what's causing this pain, I cannot be in this pain anymore. And
Yeah. I can't do it.
yeah, even if I was to conceive, who's to say like that I wouldn't have complications or that it would not cause issues in the future? I don't want to go through that.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to be able to have a hysterectomy and that like cured the adenomyosis, but it took a long time to get to that and to find the right doctor that actually listened to me and respected my
Yes.
own autonomy. And that's
Yes.
a huge thing that a lot of people don't, the doctors don't respect our own autonomy.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Women are treated like somehow like simultaneously like children and like vessels for
Yeah.
children. And it's so frustrating. And I know earlier I was like saying, like, can you imagine a man going to the ER saying that he bled for a
Yeah.
month? But like the number of times that I was like, what if I was Greg Daly? Could we just do it if I was Greg?
Yeah.
Like, you know?
Yeah.
There were times when I'm not trans, like I'm a woman, I identify as a woman, I'm cisgender. But there were times when my pain was so bad that I considered lying about being trans
Yeah.
to get like some sort of accurate, like appropriate treatment. I was like, I wonder if they would give me a hysterectomy if I said I was trans.
And
Like
and they wouldn't push so much on you having to bear children and having to keep you
exactly.
to
Yeah,
do that. Yeah.
exactly. If I shave my head and call myself Greg, will you yeet this uterus out of
Yeah.
my body, please?
Yeah.
Like, I was prepared, yeah, to give up like my gender identity in exchange for a reduction in pain. And yeah, I don't think providers or people who don't suffer from chronic pain realize that it's that intense.
Yeah. Yeah. Like for me, I think I was 25 at the time too. It's hard to remember because it's been so much. Like I've dealt with a lot of medical stuff and then the medical trauma from that. But I had multiple the transvaginal ultrasounds,
Oh yeah.
and those were like so painful. I
I
don't
hate
know
those.
like if anyone knows the pain that those are like when you have these kind of conditions,
Hmm.
but having those, and there were multiple times where like the diagnostic person who looked over it was like, oh, we weren't able to get a clear picture. We weren't able to see it. And then finally I found the right provider that was like, well, the only real way to diagnose it is to take like your uterus out.
Yep.
But they were like, I am 99% sure that this is what's going on with all of your symptoms. So
Hmm.
I was finally able to have that happen. And I like a lot of times you wake up from surgery and you're in pain. That was one of the experiences out of all the surgeries I've had where I woke up and for the first time I was not in pain. Like I wasn't having the pain I was having when I was living with this illness.
Yes.
And it was like amazing, but also like kind of incredible and wild that I woke up and I was just, I felt okay.
Yeah. No, I've heard that. As I said, I haven't had a hysterectomy. I'm in chemical menopause right
Yeah.
now, is the treatment option that they're doing for me currently.
Yeah.
And who knows if it starts melting my bones, we might just risk the
Yeah.
hysterectomy. But yeah, so because again, big spoilers, but the book ends with Briege having waking up from surgery with the hysterectomy, and she talks about feeling strangely light
Yeah.
and like searching her body for pain and it not being there. And that was based on, I read like a lot of reports of people talking about who had adeno and endo, who got hysterectomies, who were like talked about like what it was like to
Yeah.
like wake up. And yeah, you hear that report over and over and over again that the pain of surgery and the recovery from surgery is like nothing
Yeah.
compared to the pain of living with endo and adeno. The one that always really got me is every time I had a surgery, they would do my two surgeries for endo and adeno. I had not a cosmetic plastic surgery, but I had a functional like rhinoplasty done because
Mhm.
my collagen is so weak that when I inhaled, my nose used to close like a
Oh
seal.
no. Yeah.
So they fixed that, so now I can breathe.
Yeah.
But every time I've ever had a surgery, my endo surgeries were these laparoscopic surgeries, they give you like the opioids
Yeah.
as you recover from the surgeries. And I remember having like the strong painkillers, which otherwise, they're like Tylenol and a heating pad, stop being
Yeah.
such a baby. And I remember having these surgeries and having the opioids and me being like, I don't need the opioids for this.
Yeah. Yeah. Like this is nothing compared to
This is
the,
nothing.
yeah.
Yeah, it was absolutely nothing compared to what I was going through, like all the time.
Yeah.
So absolutely nuts. The other one that's really crazy, and this is a hill I'll die on, is one of the things that kept getting tried with me when they wouldn't give me a diagnosis, is I kept getting different IUDs. Because oh, what do you do when she's got lady problems? You put her on birth control,
Yeah. Yep.
but due to my Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, I couldn't take actual birth control pills or do any of like the higher dosage hormones,
Yeah.
because it would make my EDS symptoms go crazy. And the IUD made my EDS symptoms much worse as well. But they still did it.
Yeah.
And the IUD insertion, I had 3 different IUDs put in, no pain control, nothing.
That's
And it's
horrifying.
it's agony. It's
Yeah.
freakish agony. I also had a HSG, which is like I can't remember what that stands for, hystero something a gram, which is where they go through your cervix and inject dye through your fallopian
Yep.
tubes. Intensely, 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 intensely painful. Like I can't. describe in words what the pain is like. And anyone who read Scald Crow understands what I mean when I say I can't describe in words what the pain
Yeah.
is like, because when Briege's pain spikes, she kind of loses the ability to form sentences. And yeah, and no pain control. And again, I cannot imagine them doing something like that to a cisgender man. I
Yeah.
cannot imagine it.
Yeah. For real. Like for me, I don't know if you had this done. I don't remember what it's called, but they had to do where they went up through and they did like a hole punch type situation of my
Ooh,
uterus. That was horrible. And there was no pain
ooh.
management for that. And they were like, "Oh, it'll just feel like a pinch." Did not feel like a pinch.
Yeah, yes, yeah. You might have some slight cramping.
Yeah. And so like they
I'm
tried
like seeing God, you
for
know?
real. Like that's like the closest description of what the kind of pain is like.
Yeah.
They tried me on multiple birth controls, but then I never did like an IUD because I was like, that's going to be incredibly painful. Like,
It was good instinct. It was bad.
yeah, I was like, if you're going to do an IUD, it's going to have to be like, I'm going to have to go to the OR because with my like pelvic floor dysfunction, the IC, and then whatever else was going on, I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm not
I've
going to
got
be
the
able
pelvic floor
to,
dysfunction too. Yeah. And
yeah,
that's something, yeah, the chronic pain from the endo and adeno does cause like pelvic floor dysfunction and does cause other symptoms itself, you know?
yeah,
And that's another reason why the delay to diagnosis and the delay for treatment is so bad. We're not just talking about like years of someone's life lost to chronic pain.
yeah,
Being in chronic pain causes other health conditions and
yeah,
causes more disability. Uncontrolled pain is in and of itself something that can cause disability and illness.
yeah, exactly. Like,
Yeah.
when I did the depot shot, that made me bleed even longer. And I was like, okay, this isn't a solution.
This is not a solution. Yeah.
Yeah.
I I I mean, obviously, existence of birth control is a wonderful thing. You're never going to hear me say that like birth
Yeah.
control shouldn't be widely available. But we really need better solutions for women's and uterus havers healthcare, other than this kind of band-aid, like, well, let's just try a birth control. And I don't know if you got stuck in this loop, but I got stuck in a loop where there's a lot of different types of birth control. And
Yep.
every single one, they tell you, well, you have to wait 3 to 6 months for your body to level out.
Yep.
Guess how many years they can just keep giving you slightly different pills or slightly different birth controls, making you wait
Yep.
3 to 6 months of pain every single time. For years, they can just keep doing that,
Yep.
you know?
That's exactly what I
Um,
fell into.
yes, yeah, you can get stuck in kind of this infinite loop.
Yeah.
Of always having to wait 3 to 6 more months for them to try something else that, like, and they know isn't going to work,
Yeah.
So I think we also need to do a better job of getting folks off the birth control treadmill
Yeah.
faster.
Yeah.
If one or two options doesn't work, we got to move on and not do this kind of like infinite birth control loop, because it's horrible.
Exactly. And again, like we should have more autonomy to say like, no, I don't want to keep trying these things. Like, let's actually
Yeah.
find the cause.
Yes, let's actually find the cause.
Yeah.
Let's not just keep throwing hormones at me. Again, they would never do this to a
Yeah.
cisgender man. Never,
Yeah.
never, never.
Yeah.
So yeah.
One important thing, you blend dark humor into the story and it felt very relatable and fitting. Why was it important for you to add that element?
Yeah. So the main reason why I wanted The Scald Crow to be a horror comedy and not just straight horror, and why there's so many comedic elements in The Scald Crow, is because a big reason why my first manuscript, why I don't think it's like gonna ever be published. I actually love it and I actually hold it very close to my heart. And I actually consider my first manuscript that I ever wrote like my magnum opus.
Yeah.
It's the longest thing I've ever written. It was me like really just full, just like bleeding onto the page. But it's a bummer. It's all about like chronic illness and disability and not being believed, and like, even by the people who love you most, and
Yeah.
and all of the accidental ways that, you know, we make each other suffer, particularly when we don't believe one another and when we don't, you know, care for one another. And it was, you know, it was very long and very melodramatic. And nobody nobody liked it. Like, which isn't to say that when I gave it to like beta readers or agents or publishers, that isn't to say that nobody saw like artistic merit in it and
Yeah.
nobody connected to it. People connected to it and they saw artistic merit in it, but it was so unpleasant to read.
Yeah.
Like you would read a couple chapters and put it down and you didn't want to pick it up again
Yeah.
because it was just this open wound of a book. And I'm not saying that books like that don't deserve to exist and don't have value, but my goal was to connect with readers, and my goal was to actually get folks to empathize with Briege. And I needed people to want to read the book.
Yeah.
It needed to be something that like was readable, that wasn't traumatizing to read.
Yeah.
Um, and so, okay, how do you make something as painful, as traumatic as chronic pain and medical trauma and childhood trauma? Like, how do you make that digestible? And yeah, if you intersperse it with the humor, and anytime it starts to get too dark, you kind of give this relief,
Yeah.
and you give the two sides of the coin. It makes it so much more readable, so much more tolerable, and so much more relatable. And so that was the big, big, big reason why I wanted to write it as a horror comedy. I have two other reasons that it's a comedy. My next reason is just, I'm going to be honest, that after I wrote the big pulsing wound of a book,
Yeah.
I had kind of gotten out a lot of like, kudos to my therapist at the time. Thanks, Lisa. That did get out a lot of like what I really needed to like get out. And so I was more kind of able to access this part of me that's like really true to who I am, which is I'm not very good at being serious for long stretches of time. Like,
Yeah.
I really can't go 5 minutes without telling a joke, no matter how serious something is. Like, naturally, I am just kind of a goofy, silly person.
Yeah.
And so after I wrote the open wound book and I started writing more, I found that I kept leaning more and more. Even when I was writing horror, I kept leaning more and more towards comedy, and that it took effort to not be funny. Whereas if I just let myself be silly, the writing came a lot smoother. And so part of it is just my natural voice, especially once I got out like the worst of like the things I needed to say about my medical trauma. I was kind of able to access that, and it just felt more comfortable and felt more real to me. And then my third reason is that when I was 20, I dated a guy who told me I wasn't funny, and like really put like a lot of effort because he knew that it was important to me that I was funny.
Yeah.
And he put a lot of effort into putting me down for not being funny, and then got like some of my other friends to like do this bit where I would tell a joke, and then instead of laughing they would all just stare at me blank faced because they thought it was hilarious to hurt my feelings in that way. I'm not friends with any of these people anymore.
Yeah.
um, Anyways, suck it. I'm
Yeah.
a comedy writer, and
For
my
real.
book is currently a finalist for a Bram Stoker Award. So,
I
it's
love
not
that.
funny.
Yeah, I love that because there's so many things like I hate when a man tries to say something like that and it's like, no, just stop hanging up
Okay.
on it.
If you tell me that I'm not funny, I am going to go become a successful comedy writer specifically to spite you. And it might take me 12 years, but I am going to spend those 12 years.
That I relate to that so much. Like that's yes. I love that. Um
I hope that he's enjoying whatever either funnier than me or probably more likely unfunny person he is
Yes.
currently with, you know?
Probably, yeah. Probably less.
Or maybe he's single. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Felt like you, like, with your first manuscript, it felt the way you describe it is like you bled your soul onto this page. But also with the Scald Crow, you did that. But then I love that you weaved in the dark humor, because so much of that is, as chronic illness, livers and people who have that, we kind of have to temper that into our daily lives, because if we don't, we're going to just crash out. We're not
Yeah,
going to be
you
able to
gotta
survive
laugh or
it.
else you're gonna cry sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And
Um,
well, and trauma makes you funny.
yeah.
It just yeah,
It,
trauma makes
it,
you funny.
it gives you like an experience that some people don't experience that. A lot of people don't experience that. And I feel like it makes you stronger in a lot of cases, hopefully, fingers crossed. But yeah, kind of going into my next question, we talked about the childhood trauma. Briege has grown up with a mom who's extremely emotionally abusive. She went no contact with her when she became an adult. I found it fascinating where the story ends. Big spoiler alert again, for this part, because the whole time we're thinking a certain way about her parents, we find out it's another force all along. How did you decide to do that, and why involve them more again and make that your plot device?
Yeah, so the original idea for the Scald Crow, as I said, that recurrent nightmare piece was like a real recurrent nightmare I had as a kid. And I was raised super duper Catholic. And
Same.
so my original idea was actually to have that be like a demon. And to have the main antagonist be this like demon who had killed Mammy and everything, and like kind of taken over this spot. um but I I started like thinking about it that way, of it being like this demon, and I just didn't think it really like thematically worked. I am gonna write like a Catholic demon novel at some point, but I ended
I would
up
love
not.
that.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. I'm really excited for it. It's gonna be called The Sisters of No Mercy. It's gonna be about elderly exorcism nuns. It's gonna be a good time.
Oh, yes.
It's gonna be a good time. I'm really excited for it. But as I started like kind of exploring this demon angle, I was like, oh wait, I'm turning this into like a book about like Catholicism. And I was like, oh, it's too many themes. I
Yeah.
really wanted the focus of the book, of this book, to be on specifically disability, medical trauma, invisible illness, childhood trauma, and the interaction of those things. And when I added too much of this Catholicism piece, it felt like just too many things, too claggy. It didn't have a like a key focus. And so I was like, but I still wanted it to be a monster.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was like, okay, what do I do with this? At the time, I had just finished writing a novella called The Star of Kilnaley, which that's a fantasy novella, and that's coming out, I believe, this summer. We don't have a date yet, but 2026, summer 2026, keep your eyes out.
Nice.
And that was a fantasy novella told in short stories, where every short story is inspired by a different Irish folktale or folk song, and it's set in a fantasy imagined version of the American Midwest. And so I had spent a whole bunch of time getting really into Irish fantasy and reading about or Irish folklore and reading a bunch of Irish folklore. And I love Irish folklore. I'm like American Irish. My grandma was like 100% South Side Chicago Irish, so it was
Yeah.
like it's like this big thing to me. And so I'm sitting there and I'm thinking like, okay, like what if I did like an Irish folklore angle? And so I started playing around with, okay, which different Irish folkloric figures could I do? And I knew I needed a figure who was a shapeshifter, who was going to be this abusive mother figure. And I was kind of like working, like trying to like go through different folkloric figures. And one of my really good friends, Dr. Beth Kempton Patterson, is a professor at Lake College in Illinois, and she wrote her dissertation. She's a her PhD is in medieval literature, and she wrote her dissertation on the Morrigan. And so I kind of was like, oh shoot, like the Morrigan would be perfect.
Yeah.
And so then I was talking to her about it, and she was telling me all about the Morrigan. She was telling me all about her dissertation. And the more she told me, kind of the more this like story started to like take shape in my mind, because she gave me so many very interesting, very nuanced details. And I feel really bad because she ultimately was like, people always make the Morrigan like the bad guy. And the Morrigan is actually this incredibly nuanced, beautiful character. And the
Yeah.
only reason why we think of her as this like demonic, evil figure is because of the influence of Christianity and
Yep.
Catholicism and them demonizing paganism. And then I went and I did the same thing. And so actually, if you read the acknowledgments, I apologize to Beth.
I love that. Like, seriously, because, like you said, you didn't want the Catholic trauma and the Catholicism to be like a main, like,
Yeah,
arch for it. But I loved that that was included in that because to me, all of the themes blended seamlessly.
yeah,
And having the Morrigan be that, antagonist at the end was amazing because I've always kind of been fascinated by the Morrigan and I've
yeah. She's
always
cool.
loved, yeah, I've always
Um,
loved Irish folklore, so that was really cool.
It was really fun. It was fun. I like came up with my own twist on her too. Like I've never seen like the three face like simultaneously as like a
Yeah.
representation of the Morrigan. I had a lot of fun coming up with like my own like fun unique spin on her. And I made this joke in like another podcast. I make this joke a lot, but if you read Scald Crow, I hint at a universe where every god, kind of like American gods, where every god is like real and gets their power based on worship, which means that in theory, the Morrigan is a physical, real like woman walking around. Like Jesus would be too in my universe.
Yeah.
And so I keep saying I want somebody to write like a fan fiction where like my Morrigan and like Jesus like go to the farmers market together.
That would be
I think
super
they're
fun.
frenemies.
Yeah. That would be super fun.
Yeah. So I love like just thinking about the broader implications of this like weird world I made
Yeah.
where like, yeah, the Morrigan's just chilling, you know?
I love that. Like, she was really scary and, like, obviously the antagonist, but I also loved all the elements of her. And I had never seen, like, that three-faced, like,
Yeah.
represented. So that was cool.
Yeah, that was, I mean, a lot of that is, and it's described in the book, and Beth described this to me, and any Google search about the Morrigan will tell you the same. But yeah, sometimes the Morrigan is one woman, and sometimes she's, sisters.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and so I really wanted to kind of incorporate the aspect of there being sisters. It also made it a little easier to talk about like the nuance of the Morrigan too, to be like, okay, well, there are these different like faces of her and that the faces were like in conflict with one another. I think similar to real people, I think we all imagine that people have like, like one motive and one goal, and then everything aligns to that. But that's not how people actually are. A lot of the times we have, internal conflicts and internal warring. And so I loved being able to show the Morrigan even having that sort of like conflict.
Yeah. Like, because we're not all good or all evil. We all have these different parts of us.
Exactly.
Um, Couple last questions. What does horror mean to you?
Ooh, that's a really good because it can mean so many things, right? Like sometimes it's just like a fun escapist like experience to distract you from what's going on in the real world in your real life. Sometimes it's like cathartic,
Yep.
to be able to like experience these feelings and access them when you're feeling like very, very overwhelmed or whatnot. But for me, horror is a place where I get to be really, really honest about disability and about trauma and about how difficult things can be. A lot of the time, I feel a lot of pressure to be very polite about my disabilities and my limitations. And, both socially, but even in writing in genres outside horror, people don't really want to linger on any suffering, on any gore, on anything gross, on anything upsetting. You kind of yada yada over the worst parts of things so that you can move on to something exciting or fun or heartwarming or comforting or whatever. Whereas in horror, I'm really given the permission from the reader to really explore what pain and disgust and self-doubt and self-hatred, what these things are really like. And it's a freedom that you just don't get in other genres. And so for me, horror is an opportunity to be honest and to be real and to have that celebrated instead of had that shut down.
I love that answer.
Thank you. I've thought about it a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of a new one I wanted to include in my interviews because ever since I read Why I Love Horror, and it was a compilation of a lot of horror authors, that
Yes,
felt like
Becky
a really
Sprafford.
cool, yeah,
Yeah,
that felt like a
yeah,
really cool question to ask.
that's really cool. Yeah.
So, what's next for you?
That's a great question. So, the big exciting thing that's happening with Scald Crow is that Scald Crow is currently a finalist for Superior Achievement in a First Novel for the Bram Stoker Awards. So, those awards will be announced in early June at StokerCon, and I'm really, really excited about that. And it's being nominated is super great. I don't think I'm going to win. The competition is really, really fierce. All the novels in the, in first novel are really, really wonderful. And so, I'm not, but that's my really big exciting thing that I've got
Yeah.
going on. Otherwise, I do have that fantasy novella coming out this summer. That's The Star of Kilnaley. And it's really different. Even if you're like a horror person, if you liked Scald Crow, you'll probably like Star of Kilnaley. It's all Irish folklore. It's very funny. And it's a little bit of a cozy fantasy, but it's ultimately about the horrors of gentrification. And there is like a seam of like weird, disturbing darkness that runs through it, as is pretty common in Irish folklore.
Yeah.
And so I do think it's pretty enjoyable. And so that's coming out this summer. And then otherwise, I get to, and next week, actually, I'm planning on starting my next manuscript, which is going to be that nun exorcism book. It's my book about Catholicism. I've been doing, or, probably one of many, realistically. There's so much you can do when you talk about Catholicism.
Yep.
But I've been reading a lot of books about, like what, convent life is actually like. I read Father Gabriel Amort's like story, book about exorcism, and an exorcist tells his story.
Okay.
And so I've been doing like all this research about like demonology and exorcisms and like Catholic nuns. And I'm trying to make it the most realistic and accurate like nun horror book that exists. And that's my goal with that one. And then obviously everything I do, there are always disabled characters, and everything I do, that's like something that I'm not willing to budge on. So, all of these books have disabled characters and disabled representation.
That's incredible. I really look forward to everything you have coming out. And then I'm crossing my fingers that the Scald Crow does win because I really feel like it does deserve to win. Like it was
That's
incredible.
very sweet of you. Thank you.
Yeah. Um, my last question, what was the last book that blew you away?
Ooh. Okay, so we've got a little bit of recency bias here. Oh man, can I give you two?
Yeah.
Can I give you two?
definitely.
Okay. So this is recency bias. This is recency bias because I very recently read both of these. But I just finished Jeanette McCurdy's Half His Age.
Yep.
And I really enjoyed. I have a thing. I love an exploration of a power dynamic. And I loved the exploration of like power dynamics in relationships in Jeanette McCurdy in that book. Jeanette McCurdy really explores power dynamics in an interesting way. Obviously she speaks a lot from personal experience when she like writes about trauma, as we know from I'm Glad My Mom Died. And she really did. I love her writing style. I love that like very simplistic to the point prose that she
Yeah.
does. And I really did enjoy. I really enjoyed a couple of the broader points she made in Half His Age. There were some very impactful moments in it. And I thought it was pretty cool. So that one was really neat. And then the other one that I read recently that I was really blown away by, and this is not surprising that I was blown away by it because I'm a big old nerd. But I read the She-Hulk omnibus that was Rainbow Rowell's run of She-Hulk. And in it, like She-Hulk and Jack of Hearts, who's like a way like not like underknown character like meet and fall in love, and there's all this like fun like crazy battles, and it's a really fun like comic book run. It's a romp. If you're not a comic book person but you've always kind of wanted to try a comic book, and especially if you love like a big strong confident muscle mommy, like
Yeah.
She-Hulk is so fun, and so lovable, so relatable, and just yeah, it was just great. Rainbow Rowell is a lot of fun. Highly recommend her run of She-Hulk.
I'm gonna have to check that out. I read Half His Age and I loved that too. That was a recent one
Yeah,
for me and it definitely stuck with me. But the second one you mentioned, I'm definitely gonna have to check out. That sounds super
yeah, it's
fun.
it's it's fun. It's just top to bottom like a good time.
Yeah.
And I mean actually like that's one of my big recommendations for people in general. I read a lot of horror too. To be clear, neither of those books I mentioned were horror books, but I do read a lot of horror too.
Yeah.
But I read a lot of not horror as well. And Rainbow Rowell is, I consider her my favorite writer. She doesn't do anything really spooky at all. It's mostly like love stories, but she writes characters who are just so relatable, and her books like really just kind of like thrum with like a true feeling of like heart and a true depth. And so highly recommend Rainbow Rowell.
Nice. I definitely need to. I read mostly dark stuff. A lot of that's
Mhm.
horror. So
Yeah.
I need some things to kind of mix in there to lighten it up once in a while.
Yeah,
So,
one thing I really like, and I will say She-Hulk is about as light as Rainbow Rowell gets. A lot of her novels do have like a dark element to them. Like one of the things that I love about her books is even though they are love stories, they don't always necessarily have happy endings. They have more realistic endings.
yeah.
And a lot of the times the characters are dealing with very real stuff, like, childhood sexual abuse or like poverty and like things of that nature. And so she doesn't sweep stuff under the rug very often. And that makes her books better. She's better for
Nice.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Could I give you one quick recommendation from my end?
oh, please. I love a recommendation.
Have you read anything from CJ Lead?
I haven't, but Mayfly, right? I hear Mayfly's amazing.
Mayfly was my first one. The second one, though, that I think you would really love because it has that Catholic trauma and that
Love it.
Catholic
Written it
element
down.
behind it, American Rapture.
American
That's
Rapture. Okay.
one of my all time favorite books, and I will
American
recommend that
Rapture.
anytime I get a
Okay.
chance.
Perfect. I'm adding it to my list right now.
Cool.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I love a recommendation. Yeah. And I've been meaning to read a CJ Lead for a long time. So, okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you.
Thank you for meeting with me. This was a lot of fun, and I feel like we talked about a lot of important things.
Yeah.
So,
Just just put a big spoiler.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do that. I kind of figured like there was a lot of questions that were spoilery, but I feel like the whole thing is a little bit
Oh, totally
spoilery.
worth it.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. It's hard to talk about Scald Crow without spoiling it.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
All
yeah,
right.
this was
Thank you
awesome.
so much.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye.
Bye.